Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Turin here with another Warhammer Total War online commentary. In this particular battle, I'll be playing the Dwarves, led by High King Thorgrim, who's being carried by his loyal Longbeards over here. I'm going to be facing off against a Greenskin opponent, actually. So a nice grudge match, always a pretty fun one, and makes for a pretty wild time with all those Orc Boar units and different things that'll be running around you. So as far as my army composition goes, against the Greenskins, guys, it's very, very important to bring armor-piercing troops, because what is the intuitive counter to the high armor of the Dwarves? It's Black Orcs. So as you can see, my opponent actually brought 3 groups of Black Orcs, which is pretty big investment. That's 3,000 or 3,300 resources, I believe. So you kind of need to match that in tow. And I feel like that was one of the mistakes I made this game, is I don't know if I brought quite enough armor piercing. I have a group of Longbeards here, a standard group of Longbeards in the middle just to deal with Orc Boys and fodder units, another group of Longbeards with great weapons, then a third one, which may seem like a lot, but again, Black Orcs are a very, very tough unit, guys. 2 groups of Quarrelers here. I have the High King with the Book of Grudges to buff all his nearby troops, so you can see their melee attack is substantially buffed. Then some Dwarf Warriors. I usually keep the low tier Dwarf Warriors in the back because they're pretty good at dealing with cycle charging from Orc Boar Boys. And also Orc Boar Boys don't have the highest combat stats. So the Dwarf Warriors, in conjunction with the Runesmith and High King Thorgrim, they can usually do a pretty good job at dealing with that. Then I had a little bit of extra money, so I got rid of the Foe Seeker on High King Thorgrim to get an extra group of Miners. So I have 2 groups of those. And of course a Runesmith and a Thane. More importantly, guys, this is kind of the quintessential aspect of this build, is the Gyrocopters. The Gyrocopters are just so good against Greenskin Cavalry. I mean, granted, Greenskin Cav, they're not the most heavily armored troops, but these guys do have an anti-large bonus, which also does apply to Orc Boar Boys. So very, very good at dealing with the cavalry harass. And when the dwarves are usually very weak against it, I feel like this is one of the better answers, especially since Greenskin missile troops like Arrow Boys aren't the best, so they usually aren't very effective at taking down Gyrocopters. So it's a quick overview of my army. My opponent has a very, very good army composition as well. So he has 2 groups of Orc Arrow Boys. He has some Orc Boys in the front line to absorb my missile fire. And also, they'll be have decent exchanges with the standard infantry. And also they're good fodder against Longbeards with great weapons. So he has 3 groups of Black Orcs back here. He has a Night Goblin Shaman with the various nasty business that he brings to the table. He has Grimgore, which actually isn't bad against the dwarves. He has armor piercing, and he's very, very good at hero hunting. So if he can get his paws on High King Thorgrim or any of my Thane or my Runesmith, he'll cut through them. So very, very tough guy to fight against. He has a Goblin Big Boss, Doomdiver Catapult, which I'm a huge fan of in this matchup. And then he has 2 groups of Orc Boar Boys over here, which that's pretty much all you need, guys. They have armor piercing and anti-infantry. So that's pretty much, the full Swiss Army knife of what you need to deal with the dwarves. And then he also has another group of Orc Boar Boys over there and some Goblin Wolf Riders in the back, which is very, very well played. He's going to be coming at me from all angles. So let's see how this goes, guys. So I'm going ahead and setting up my Gyrocopters up the hill here, and I didn't actually know he was here. I was actually just dodging these units, so you can see some nice matrix moves there from those Gyrocopters. They're able to dodge effectively, and then they're going to circle around the back because that Doomdiver Catapult, guys, can only turn so fast. So if I just do some serious laps here, he's not going to be able to keep up, but you can see I'm doing kind of a shift pathing out and around here. But my opponent does detach some Arrow Boys here to deal with it, which is very well played because that is not a cost-effective trade for me. Granted, I might be able to win, but the amount of time they would spend dealing with those, low-tier Arrow Boys would not be worth it. So I am taking some Doomdiver fire. In the meantime, he hit my Longbeards in the front line and did pretty substantial damage, actually, with a good 15% of their HP down. And you can see these Doomdivers are continuing to shoot in and are just doing pretty devastating damage to my units. Always bringing at least 1 Doomdiver Catapult is very, very cost-effective in my opinion. Not only does it pressure your opponent and force him to come to you, but it essentially, allows you to dictate the state of the battle. So I do have my Gyrocopters here. I send 1 unit out and around the back here, and I do notice his cavalry right now. So the Orc Boar Boys are coming out, and I send my Gyrocopters on them immediately. And you can see they're going to get some decent pot shots, and you can see they're already taking out models. So not a bad situation, but unfortunately for me, he has Cav coming from this direction, and then he also has some Goblin Wolf Riders coming from the flank here. So very, very tough. I'm essentially surrounded, and he does have, missile superiority with that Doomdiver Catapult, so I basically have to come to him, which is a very tough situation, but it's also a fun one to be in and really test yourself out. So I do have this Gyrocopter here, so I have it start taking some pot shots at these Doomdivers back here, which is working out pretty well for me. Unfortunately for me, these Longbeards with great weapons are taking missile fire from the Arrow Boys, which is not cost effective for me, as they are not a shielded unit, so I go ahead and decide I need to engage. And with Longbeards with great weapons, there's not really a point in just standing and not charging because they don't have charge defense, so I will be charging those. And you can see I formed kind of a missile line here with my Quarrelers who are starting to take some shots at his Arrow Boys, and they will definitely outclass those guys. And you can see the gyrocopters are able to generate really good results against the Orc Boar boys, and actually, did a good 30 to 40% of their HP damage on that one group. So he does come in here, and I do have a bit of an opening here, so I definitely was a little stressed out about that. But regardless, you can see I immediately path back my missile troops, pull these Dwarf Warriors from auxiliary to kind of gather in there, and they'll be engaging on these guys. And then also the Rune of Wrath and Rune is very cost effective. So unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to brace for that charge, but I didn't really have much time. I needed to get those Dwarf Warriors in there to stop that charge. And you can see the Quarrelers, they didn't really take any damage. They did a pretty good job, but the Goblin Wolf Fighters are coming in, and the Dwarf Warriors weren't able to kind of get in their way, because I was microing something in the front line and they just barely snuck through. So that's definitely the advantage my opponent has with all of these different cav units. It's just very, very tough to deal with. But on that same note, my gyrocopters are doing a very, very good job covering these guys. And I think with the High King nearby with his buffs, and you can see he's just smashing some Goblin Wolf Riders here, I should be able to stabilize. And, as a Dwarf player, or just, when you're playing the Dwarves, one of the most important things is stabilizing your back line, kind of while your, troops can hold in the front line, just so then you can kind of reposition yourself to develop a new defensive perimeter and, do well in that regard. So I do have my gyrocopters back here, which did a pretty good job. I decided to just land them and have them melee because I thought that would be faster at clearing out these Doom Divers, and it was definitely very cost effective for me. But one thing that is very, very grim is he has his Goblin Big Boss. He has Grimgor over here who's just absolutely pounding my Thane. And this is, kind of a time when I really was wishing I had Ungrim, because if I had Ungrim up here fighting Grimgor, I think I would have a much better situation on my hands. But these Longbeards with great weapons are holding pretty well against the Black Orcs and Orc Boys, but my opponent did a very good job. You can see, so he has Orc Boys in here, right? And then he has Black Orcs behind them. So most of my Dwarf Warriors and Miners are hitting the Orc Boys, while these Black Orcs are still getting in there and getting their hits in. So a much more cost-effective trade. My armor piercing is not being combat effective on his armor. So very, very well played on my opponent's part. And definitely, I should have mixed my troops a little bit better, or perhaps just brought more armor piercing overall. But regardless, the Dwarf Warriors did a pretty good job in the back line, and you can see the High King. I get a pretty decent surround, but some of his Orc Warriors did penetrate through the front line. You can see this whole pocket here was where my forces lost, so I was forced to pull back. But I did find some stability for my Quarrelers, who are now just taking some decent shots over here at these Orc Air Boys, who are all shaken. And I believe I was doing some bombing runs here, so I can't remember, but I think I was actually about to do bombing runs. But in the middle, I did stabilize, and I have a very healthy group of Dwarf Warriors. I have some Longbeards over here, if I'm not mistaken, and things are going, not too bad. But he does have a lot of troops that, did get chased off, like these Goblin Wolf Riders who are shaken, and then he has some Orc Boars back here. And, all these units, even though there's only a few models left, they make a big deal. If they come in here and get a nice charge on these Quarrelers, that can shut down a lot of value, guys. So definitely still some scary circumstances about this battle. You can see these Quarrelers are doing a pretty good job at taking out these Arrow Boys, and hopefully that'll send him running for the hills. He does have a lot of low-tier infantry that'll probably come back, but regardless, the High King in here, and these guys are doing a pretty good job at dealing with these Black Orcs, but again, none of them have armor piercing, so this is not a cost-effective trade for me, and it's going to take me a long time to get through them, even with the High King here. You can see the Runesmith is nearby. He's chasing off some of these Orc Boys here. And right now, this was what was really stressing me out. So I was really counting on these Longbeards and Dwarf Warriors and Miners up there to hold. But unfortunately, it was definitely tough to hold back the fury of the Black Orc, Grimgor Ironhide, as well as the Night Goblin Shaman back here, who is casting a multitude of buffs on his troops. I don't know if he put one on right now, but regardless, he was before, and it was very, very hard to deal with that front line. So I do come in here right now, and I believe I get a nice little bombing run, so you can see the Black Orcs taking some explosives there. Definitely a very, very fun ability to use, and, I got you guys to thank for that. So this is what he was doing, though. I believe he was casting Itchy Nuisance, which is pretty good in this matchup. And this is a very dense group of Black Orcs, guys, and I don't have much armor piercing left. And you can see, like I was telling you guys, Grimgor got in there, and he's just cracking skulls. And he sent the High King running for the hill. So I definitely really wish that I brought Ungrim Iron Fist at this point. I was wishing I had the ferocity of the Slayer King to get in here and deal with all these Black Orcs. I do still have two groups of Quarrelers online who are doing a pretty decent job. They've, my backline is stabilized for the most part. Most of his missile troops are, either shaken or have already fled. And you can see a lot of these Orc Boars are being fended off by my gyrocopters, so I'm keeping on the perimeter. And I am running out of ammunition, so I'm having to dive bomb them. And you can see them chasing those Black Orcs over there. So right now, the Thorgrim Grudgebearer, I did decide to send him after this Night Goblin Shaman because I did not want him in the pocket with Grimgor. And I'm continuing to drop bombs, just using every resource I had to try and win this battle. And at this moment, I was feeling fairly confident as a lot of these Black Orcs were routing off. And that's still a lot, guys, 20 Black Orcs. So I send my gyrocopters with the melee attack to come in after them and just dive bomb them. And you can see they're in there with their propellers just riding through these guys and because that's a really powerful force, believe it or not. So thankfully, I was feeling okay. The High King over here was fighting a Goblin Big Boss, which he does have quite superior stats when you look at them comparatively. 450 weapon strength, 360. So I pull some Dwarf Warriors to over to help out, and it looks like this battle was going to go okay for me. I actually wasn't terribly stressed about it, so that's going okay. He's now shaken, coming in and out of that leadership, and that was okay. But really, this was not going well for me here. The Night Goblin Shaman and Grimgor over here were just cracking skulls and taking names, and very tough circumstance for me. And I do at this moment see a bunch of troops coming back. I saw some Orc Boars and some what are these? I think these are just Orc Boys. And then the Air Boys are also back online, so I had to pull in my Gyrocopters in kind of one desperate last stand, and was hoping that they would be able to kind of crack the leadership of these low tier troops. But unfortunately, you can see the armor piercing Orc War Boys coming back, and then in conjunction with the Goblin Big Boss, that's definitely a tough situation for me to be in, guys. So, unfortunately for me, I think that's the end of days, and the Black Orc himself was able to just, rout off my forces. So it just goes to show it's a really fun matchup, guys, and my opponent definitely played really well. He had that really dynamic pressure, so he had Orc Boars coming from all angles. So not only did I have to account for that, and it forced my main army away from my front line. So a lot of my dwarves with great weapons who were fighting the Black Orcs, they had the support of Grimgor, they had the support of the Orc Shaman, whereas my leadership, the Thane was pretty much the only thing in the front line. I was kind of having to use that Runesmith to deal with his cap charges, so it kind of took away the solidarity of my army. So in this matchup, I think Ungrim would have been a lot better. Granted, Thorgrim did pretty well, but I really needed that extra armor piercing for my leadership. And, I wasn't really reaping the benefit of Thorgrim's buffs in my frontline engagement, which was the most valuable, was getting rid of those Black Orcs. Those were the real threat. So, again, really well played to my opponent, Hob Olympic. It was a lot of fun. I look forward to seeing you again on Ladder, and I hope you guys enjoyed that game. Have an excellent night, and take care.